Most people aren't miserable. They're living lives that are just fine. A 7 out of 10 job, a 7 out of 10 relationship, and a 7 out of 10 sense of fulfillment. Terrible, passable, can't complain. And the danger with a 7 out of 10 life is it's comfortable enough to stay exactly where you are. Not bad enough to force anything to change, but also not good enough to make you feel fully alive. Let's get straight into this because I think this is something that isn't spoken about enough. I want to get under the bonnet with what really happens here for people. So, George, why do you think people end up living 7 out of 10 lives?
I'm not sure if you've heard about how they used to like boil frogs in France when they were cooking it, which is not how I assume you imagined I would answer that. But the idea is that you
Not for
put
the
frogs in water and then you slowly boil it. And apparently it's better if you cook them alive or something, but they don't notice because it changes so gradually. So the reason why I think people end up in 7 out of 10 lives is because there's like a slow slip from, fulfillment. Often you start a new job, it's quite exciting, maybe the first few months, and then over time, your life kind of slips into something that's comfortable, but you don't really notice. And because there's never any massive drastic, or if there is a massive drastic, crisis, like a breakup or a burnout, then that leads to change. When there's just like a slow slip into something that's comfortable but not amazing, we can't really notice. And unless you're then proactively, and this is, I guess, where personal development comes in, proactively like reflecting on that and reviewing, you can't really notice that actually I'm no longer doing the things that I care about or seeing the people that I really love or like not really super happy every day. So I think it is that slow kind of shift, which means that people can fall into, as you would say, more like a 7 out of 10 life.
Yeah. And I mean, you've kind of answered one of the next questions already there, but it was like, do you obviously, like you said, you work with a lot of people who you know, are in these situations. And I was going to say, like, do you find that people just kind of tend to slip into it, or is it more of a point of people end up just kind of like, oh, that'll do, and just settle for the first thing that comes their way, the first relationship, the first job, the first this or that, the people around them, you settle, and that's kind of it.
Interesting question. I think it varies a bit, but in general, I've found that there is a kind of like stage of life where this happens. Like a lot of people have quite a busy, let's say, social life while they're through school. And obviously, a lot of people struggle at school and stuff. But in general, people have, some kind of sports or clubs and like different group of friends. They got a timetable they follow and they kind of tick along. And then they go to uni and people have their uni experience, whatever that looks like. And then there's some point a few years into whatever job they start doing, it might be one or two, it might be like 10, where people suddenly slip into something. And I've been thinking a lot about why that might be. I think it might be because just in especially like a Western society, like your job is like a big part of how people think about you. If you're talking to if you're referring to, I don't know, if you've got any young cousins or like children, you just say like, oh, this is like Timmy. He's like really loves like football and he's like really energetic. You don't define him by the fact that of what he's studying or what he does for work. But as we get older, we become like a consultant or a banker or a lawyer or whatever it is, or a PT. Whereas there's so many different parts to our life. So I think you get to this point where so much of your life is like encapsulated by your work and what you do, that the other things start to like fall by the wayside, and that can like spill over to like a comfortable, living environment where you're living, relationship, friendships, whatever. And so I kind of think it's a sort of cultural thing, which is a bit of an interesting take maybe, but I think it is something that's quite pervasive. I'm not sure what were your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's interesting you say like cultural. It's a very cultural thing. So like I've been watching a lot of like YouTube stuff about like different cultures and different things like that. And I was watching a video about a guy who was traveling through Papua New Guinea, and like you see how different people. Like I love that kind of like on the ground. Like you actually see stuff. It's not a stage TV thing. It's basically a guy walking through the country with with yeah, with GoPro footage he uploads from his hotel room at night or whatever. Actually seeing how different people like live their life and go and having those conversations. And, obviously just using the PNG one as example, like it's seeing how people live. Their values are very, very, very different. And it's interesting what they say. And a lot of it is around like sort of like cultural expectations and which I guess is kind of similar to example to what you said, because a lot of this is very cultural expectations. You should have this by this age and do that, and you should be married by this point. You should have your first kid by this point, and the 20 whatever should always be like your salary should always be the same or higher kind of like idea. But like none of that existed there. It was a very different kind of like cultural expectation, and you understand like seeing what people can like do for work, and that like some people are the happiest people that you see, and they go and collect wood from the forest and live in a hut on the beach, and like you've never seen anyone as happy and content as as can be. And it's interesting to see it. Like that was very interesting that you said about the cultural side of
Mm.
that. And we're even at uni, like your life is very kind of like timetabled for you. You have that kind of like nine, well, even school for certain, you have that like 9 till 3, what's happening, and then you have bits bolted on at the end of the day. And we hit adult life and we just don't do that. And I'm not saying that you need to have arts and crafts on a Monday and football on a Tuesday, you go swimming on a Wednesday. I don't think that's necessarily the extreme that you need to go to, but is it any wonder that we end up in these situations where we're struggling and feel lost when we remove that level of structure of, well, I know on a Monday we do this and then on Tuesday we do that. And you want that spontaneity and to like almost like rebel against the system. But yeah, it's a funny one.
I think yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say it's like when you were talking about that, it made me think. I kind of think of there as being like almost like two different life models. One is where you sort of work to live, which is like the predominant cultural one. So like you have a day job, a 9 to 5, which is hopefully like vaguely interesting, but it kind of funds your fun, really enjoyable life at the weekends, on your holidays, and in the evenings. And that's kind of what most people have. And then obviously over time, if that's taking up more time or not paying you well enough or not giving you enough fulfillment, then you're kind of missing out on the other parts. Or you have more of like what it sounded like in Papua New Guinea, like, and what historically people would have more of, which like before like capitalism is like more of a live to work lifestyle where what you're doing and how you're sustaining yourself is part and parcel of your general life. And that's kind of the switch that I've made from like a corporate job where I was very much like working in these like structured hours and then organizing fun outside of it. And obviously, even within that, you can be better or worse at like making time for things that matter, to like one where it's kind of all blended in. And then you were talking about how, do you need to have like your extracurricular activities scheduled in at the week? And for some people that does work, because the one place where we do have that sort of structure, it tends to be within our job. And like we do like get the meetings done and like normally get the work done. And then you work towards the goals, the promotions, and that doesn't then spill over to the rest of your life, which is what I find super interesting and tend to work with a few people on because, they hit their professional goals, but most people have these New Year's resolutions and they just forget about it by this time of the year, which is like March. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The way that I see it as well, like is off the back of what you were saying is, you have all these like scheduled meetings and everything along those lines. And you never, very rarely miss meetings, you very, very rarely miss targets. But you almost don't have that opportunity there to make the difference that you need. And very interesting what you said about having the ability to schedule that in. Do that to a level that is like a skill set. So what do you, if you were to advise, like what would you suggest to someone who's struggling to get in time with their friends, struggling to get in extracurricular activities? Is there anything that you would say to particularly focus on that you found that A, worked particularly well for you, or B, worked particularly well for your clients to help improve that level of fulfillment?
yeah, I think the short answer is schedule it in your calendar. The slightly longer answer, where that comes from, is Stephen Covey spoke a lot about this in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But essentially, they split life and activities into like 4 different areas. So you've got things that are urgent and things that are important, and things that are not urgent but are important, things that are not urgent or important, and so on and so forth. You get a little matrix. And whenever you ask anyone what they love more time, what would they love to, spend more time doing? It's always things that are important but not urgent. You never have to do it today. And this is like exercise, seeing friends, planning your goals, like reviewing, checking in with your relationship. All these sorts of things are kind of important, we'd say, but they're never urgent. And then we spend too much time doing things which are like seem urgent but aren't that important, like replying to notifications. And the way to make more time for these like two like quartile two things, which are important but never urgent, is normally to like schedule them in. And in terms of like specific details, how to do that, the way that I found sort of worked with me and with clients and stuff is to like not like give yourself too many tasks. Like, right, this week I'm gonna like learn the guitar and like write a poem and like go and meet every single one of my friends and like also like write a book and all these things. Right. It's like, okay, start small. What is like one thing you'd love to have done by the end of the week? And then schedule that in and treat it like a meeting with your boss at work or something, right? So like respect that boundary. Make it like short, like maybe it's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just like even 2 minutes. Start small and then schedule that in, whether you use like a physical diary or calendar or I just use my phone. But that is like game changing for me. And so even though it sounds boring, I schedule in when I'm seeing my friends, when I'm calling my friends, when I'm playing football, when I'm going surfing, when I'm going to the beach and everything. And it sounds boring that I kind of have to organize it. But the not boring side is the fact that I see my friends and I play football and I play sax and I go surfing and, I get to do those things. So that's what works for me and my clients and generally in personal development literature and stuff like that is a pretty good way of going about it. I don't know. Have you found anything else that works?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think kind of off the back of what you've said, there is like boring is boring, but like boring pays the bills, which is not a really sexy answer. I wish there was a cool way of like clipping that up and being like, yeah, let's, social media clip that goes viral. And it's like, this is the new way. And it's really fucking boring. It's not massively exciting and it doesn't break the status quo. And I can't wrap it up in a sexy way. Just like most of the stuff that you need to do is incredibly boring. And I think that's why most people don't do it. Even people who, and again,
Mm,
I feel this myself, like even people who know that and talk about it, we still sometimes just don't do it. And I think because it's boring. Like we don't do the boring things. Yeah. So kind of like off the back of your point, we are talking before we hit record on the episode about how I've recently started CrossFit, and it has been the most consistent, and I've made the most progress with training I have done in years. Yeah, there is the community element. Yeah, there is the group element. But fundamentally, like saying I'm going to go to work, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to go to the gym after work or before work or whatever is great. But like, there's no like kind of like consequence if you don't. Uh,
mm,
but the level of like kind of like booking, the fact that you have to book it in, and there's like a level of expectation to turn up. Now, there is a level of humanity in that of, oh, I've got sick, or, I tweaked my back because that's topical for me. Like all these little things that you can, pop up. It's really simple stuff, but it's like having that ability to have it booked in rather than anything else. So yeah, that's definitely like the biggest thing for me is what you're saying is have it booked. It almost have that like level of like accountability
yeah.
to outside of you. Like, yeah, be accountable to yourself, sure. But again, that's still really easy to be like, oh, I'm going to wake up at this time. Oh, I'm going to snooze again.
Yeah.
Like, there's still that thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to wake up half an hour early you know, to journal, to meditate, to go for a walk, to do all the stuff that I know I should do, but you don't. Like,
Yeah.
it's easy to just kind of like say that to yourself. But I know damn well if I say to someone, anyone, that, I'm going to do this and I don't have a good reason not to, hell, what happens? It's kind of like, you get sick. Sometimes other stuff is busier. It's not necessarily a bad thing or something that can or should be avoided. Like there's going to be peaks and drops and times that you need to pull off and times you need to push. Um, but yeah, that's definitely kind of how I view all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think corporations, like the places we work, have had loads of money, loads of time pumped into them over time to ensure that people work as best as possible to help the company do whatever the company does, right? But then those same systems actually are what, and so it is just a case of, as I've spoken about this a lot before, like using those things that you use at work, setting goals and like having little check-ins and reviews and booking things in that work for work, also work for you, whether that's across your relationship or like sport and things. And to your point around accountability, I know that's like quite a popular one, and like James Clear talks about it a lot in like the Power of Habit and Atomic Habits. The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg is another one. They talk about how can you build little systems, and accountability is key. But I would also say figure out what works best for you. And I talk a lot with my clients about, is it like the stick, like a punishment, or like a carrot, like a reward? And so if you're the kind of person that would say you're a people please, you don't let like letting people down, you can kind of use that to your advantage. Say, well, I'm going to tell everyone that I'm going to this gym class, and it sounds like that's what works for you, Harvey, and therefore you definitely go. Similarly, for other people, if they really love working towards something, it's like, all right, well, if you go to a gym class 5 days a week, you can go out for your favorite takeaway, you buy yourself whatever, and so you build these little systems that kind of gamify it. I had one client who used to donate to a charity he didn't care about if he left work late as like a punishment, like completely random little things that kind of work. But if it works for you, then it works. And you only need to do it to get over a little hurdle until you build a little system and you don't need to worry about it anymore. So yeah, it's a funny one to play around with.
That's really interesting. That was something I thought about as well. Like, and I just thought that's horrible. So I was gonna, back in the PT and fitness day, I was gonna do like a challenge, and it was like X amount for the challenge, and then he was like, right, then you put £100 deposit down, and you get that back if X Y Z. Like you hit your input, but I'm also like, you also sign that if you don't agree, like if you don't hit, like in terms of effort, like the standard that you set for yourself at the start, like I'll donate that to a charity that you nominate
Yeah.
you don't like. And I thought, no, that's really horrible. And I'd like said it, and I'm like, I don't know how I would sell it as like a product, but I'm like,
Yeah.
so you pay the challenge, like your the cost of the program, then also it's plus £100 that you might get back. And I was like, oh, it's such like, I looked into it and I'm like, that's such a, it's way too techy. But, as putting money into something you don't necessarily agree with, bloody hell, like that's as something to really kick you up the arse and like get you to do it. And I don't like you said, I don't think that's a long-term thing of like beat yourself into
Mm.
submission, into doing the things that you think you should do, because like, I don't think that like that doesn't work. The sort of like the stress, the pressure, I'm going to beat yourself into submission. And if it doesn't work, you beat yourself harder. That's, in my opinion, is no way to live. And I can't see that works like massively, work massively well. Like I know that really, really wouldn't work well for me. And I would end up just resenting whatever it is that I'm trying to work on, because I'm like, well, fundamentally I strap it back and I'm like, this is shit and painful and not fun and zero enjoyment. I mean, probably my inner avoidant coming out, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to walk away from it. Fuck you all.
Yeah. But that's where, like, if the punishment, like the stick doesn't work for some people, then they use the reward, right? An extra special treat. And it's like, for some people, it's like not wanting to let other people down, hence accountability, telling people is good. For other people, it's like financial. So therefore, it's like put your money where your mouth is. And whatever works for you is good. And it's only, as you said, to build a system in the same way that I assume you clean your teeth every day. Is that easy? I don't know. How do you find it?
I guess even using the brushing your teeth example, and if I think back to when that's a thing, and when you're like learning about that, and school or at preschool, like your mum and dad teaching you about it, that is quite fearmongery.
Exactly. Right.
Is very fearmongering.
That is, yeah. You don't want to lose your teeth. Brush the ones you want. All this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually really interesting. It's like, I guess there is like a level of like fear, and I don't want to do that. I don't. Yeah, I must.
But also, you want nice teeth, right? You want to look like the people on the dentist side. So it's a bit of both. And that's where the point is, like, now it's easy. So the whole point is it's not hard to brush your teeth. And so if you do want to build a system, sometimes you just like get over a little hurdle, and then you get to the point where it's just like brushing your teeth. And then you're fine, right? So that's where it can be, yeah, just like a useful little bonus.
Yeah, definitely. And what if someone was listening, and I know that before I realised that, oh, that's not quite right here. I was almost in denial. So if someone was listening to this and they were not, they're like, oh, this doesn't really apply to me, or, like almost getting a bit like sort of triggered by this, by what we're talking about. Also, if you're getting triggered by something, it means that you need to listen to it and investigate it. I would say personally, gently, and like, let's start to understand what's really happening here. But if someone was like, oh, I don't know if this is me, maybe this is me, what questions sort of work? Is there anything that you would suggest someone to do to start to investigate those thoughts and feelings and be like, okay, well, maybe this is me. Maybe this is something that I need to
Specifically with like building habits and systems?
more the sort of 7 out of 10, the sort of 7 out of 10 lifestyle. Like if
I
that's something
think, yeah.
that you think that you may have slipped back into.
I think the first thing with a lot of this is normally to be like self-compassionate. So like be kind to yourself as you're thinking about this. And, I had a similar sort of mindset. It was, oh, my life's not bad. And first thing, like your life being bad in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you just need some support. And that's where there's great services like therapy and so on, right? And that's, as they say, like, very courageous to take those steps. But then similarly, if you are at a point where your life is like, say, a 7 out of 10, that means it's good, right? 7 is kind of good out of 10. The whole point is then you have a choice of, do you want to make it better and strive for whatever your 10 out of 10 is? This is all completely subjective. And so the good news is if you're feeling like maybe this is resonating a little bit, then that's good because that shows that there is still ambition there to grow. If you're sat back and being like, nah, you know what, I'm fine with my life, that might be fine because you might be living your 10 out of 10 life, but it also might mean that you've given up on whatever dreams or ambitions you have. So if there is a little bit of where this kind of is resonating, you're like, yeah, maybe there are some more goals I'd want to do, or maybe some things I'd want to make time for. That's like amazing. So first, be self-compassionate that you've got yourself to a 7 out of 10. And then second, be grateful that you've now got a bit more ambition to go even further. So that's the kind of like mindset I'd go into it with. And then in terms of the questions I would ask yourself, very simply, it should be quite exciting and fun. All of this stuff around coaching and 7 out of 10 to 10 out of 10, it's like, it shouldn't be too heavy. Like we're not talking about, like serious like childhood trauma that's holding you back and you're stuck at a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, struggling to look to get to a 5 out of 10. It should be exciting. Like, what does a 10 out of 10 look like? So some of the questions would literally simply be, what does your ideal day? I talk a lot about, your ideal Tuesday. What does that look like? Just start very simply, like, what time are you waking up? What are you wearing? What are you doing? Like, what excites you? What do you want more of? Start really simple. Like, in the next week, if you could do anything extra, what last week, if there's one more thing you would have loved to have done, what would it have been? What would you love to look back at the end of your life and have spent more time doing? All these little fun questions should be quite exciting because you're thinking about, if you don't care about F1 or you don't care about football, you're not going to be writing about football. You're going to be writing about the things that matter to you. So ask yourself the really simple questions of what you want more of and where you want to go. And if it feels boring, you're doing it wrong because it should be exciting, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and that kind of leads it nicely on to like the next sort of couple of points I wanted to make. And when I first started questioning this sort of stuff, and I would say, well, if I was to do it again, I would do it very, very differently. And I've spoken a few times about in this sort of series of the pod about kind of like opening the Pandora's box of life. And like sometimes you have these realizations and you're like, oh shit, like, I can't put that back in, like can of worms, whatever you want to call it. And for me, like when I started to do that, like I completely lost my head and I spiraled very, very negatively, very, very quickly. And I put myself and the people around me were a lot more suffering than I probably needed to. And that's where I've kind of come on to learn stuff about self-compassion and honoring how I feel. Now, if we were to rewind the clock 3 years and I was talking about that, I would be there like, huh, huh. It would make 2023 me, even before that, like feel very, very sick. And I'd almost be like, oh, what you saying that for? What you saying that for? And again, it's just some of these things that like you need to like learn. And I don't know, for me, certainly it's like sometimes I just need to learn things the hard way. Because yeah, it's horrible to go through, but bloody hell, you learn quickly and you learn not to do that again. Like it makes it very, very simple. as well. So like for me, I would say one of the biggest things was I absolutely lost my head when I first started to question that. I suffered a lot more than I needed to. And it really didn't work very, very well for me. So in your opinion, like when you start to question it, how do you kind of stay on the straight and narrow, or want of a better phrase than kind of losing your head?
I think there's probably two key points here. The first is, as you said, when you, in this metaphor, open the Pandora's box and you realize, perhaps you realize that, you're not doing things you enjoy, or you have a completely different view, or like something big needs to change, or not really living according to your values or whatever. Sometimes before like a period of growth, there is like a bit of tension or, discomfort because you're faced with what's basically known as like cognitive dissonance. And this is where the way you're living your life, the actions you're taking are not matching up with what's important to you. And if I look back over the past like 5 years, I've had this like several times in terms of like going vegan, stopping drinking alcohol, changing career, moving to Australia. All of these are like, when I look back, they're quite big changes, but they were all like prefaced by a period of opening Pandora's box, learning new things about things that I didn't know, then like being confronted with my actions, not being sure, like going through this journey. And the things that help first are that cognitive dissonance is all like in your head, and things like feeling anxious and unsure and overwhelmed is often when your what you're thinking is not being played out by your actions. So the first key thing to do is to start really small with your actions. So like if you are like, you've opened this Pandora's box and you realize all these things, maybe you're not enjoying your work or your relationship or whatever it is, and it's in your head, the more it stays in your head and you don't change anything, the more heightened that feeling is going to get. So if you can distill it down into like a tiny step, I'm not saying quit your job. I'm saying like write a list of things you might want to do. I'm not saying like, you know, move country. I'm saying like have a think about what parts of where you live you do or don't like. Just start so small and just writing things down. This is where like journaling, therapy, talking to people, like taking small actions helps. That can be a really good antidote. And I think the second one would be not comparing yourself to others, which I know sounds really easy and is kind of cliche, but I like to do that by proactively comparing myself to myself, because you're naturally going to compare yourself to others when you see them online all the time. You're always, we're very social individuals. You see other people. And so you're naturally going to do that a little bit, but rather than just telling yourself, don't compare yourself to others, which is like, how do you do that? Don't think of a red elephant. Think of a red elephant. It's to proactively compare yourself to yourself and think, okay, well, how have I grown over the past week? What's one tiny thing I could do? Let's keep that promise. And kind of that's where like the reflections and stuff comes in. Because as you said, it can be definitely overwhelming. I've been through that journey with loads of different areas of my life quite recently and yeah, for a long time.
Yeah. Obviously, like I said, you have this level of awareness that we've spoken about, and you said you've been through some of those sort of challenges more recently. How are you approaching that differently to than you have before?
I think,
How does it look and how does it feel that different to previously?
yeah, I think now I have like some better systems in place to support myself with this. So if there are, and that's the thing, a lot of these things, like we're kind of facing one now, which is how long are we going to live in Australia for? Like I'm coming on to my third of the current visa, like third year of that. And so it's kind of like a question we're going through, but there's a few different systems in place that I put which support me with that. So rather than just like vaguely having the back of my mind and stressing about it, uh, I like, so every morning, for example, I like journal. For me, that doesn't look like what most people does. I have this little app on my phone. I just answer a few quick prompts, like what am I grateful for? What's my day looking like? Anything I'm like frustrated by or like, and then like one or two key things I want to complete by the end of the day. But that helps. Then every week I will like reflect on my wins and like plan like a couple of key priorities I want to do. Every month I have like a check in with my girlfriend about how our relationship's going on. I do a similar thing for me and my goals every quarter. Then I'm setting goals. So like I build these little systems so it never like builds up into the point where I'm just like stressing about it without ever having faced it. So I think that's the difference. Whereas if I look back to say the first big change I maybe made, which was something like stopping drinking alcohol, I just vaguely in the back of my mind kept being like, I keep having these massive sessions of being like incredibly hungover and like not completing things. And I feel kind of bad about it, but or whatever. And then just like kind of like not really think about it for like 6 months. And then,
Yeah.
something else happens. And then like eventually actually sitting down and facing it kind of helped. And that's where I think journaling, talking to people can be quite good.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the biggest thing for me was like, I thought I had to solve the problem there and then.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
that's tough.
and again, a lot of my like unnecessary suffering came from that belief that this must be fixed now. This must be fixed now. It's like a level of like, don't touch the hot stove, but I'm touching it and I'm not pulling my hand off. Fundamentally, like it was never like that. Like I built it up to be this massive thing.
Mm,
Don't get me wrong, challenging your identity, challenging lots of questions that you know, having those sort of realizations isn't necessarily easy to have. Like the biggest thing for me is I just realized that things take time, and like through this process for me, it's around patience. Patience has been something that's massive for me. Things that take, it's a work of months and years rather than hours and days. Like I'm not going to suddenly turn around and be like, oh my god, like I get it all now. It all makes sense.
yeah,
Like it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Like, and these big things take time. And I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. It's almost like I need those thoughts to kind of like settle and marinate a little bit,
mm,
not necessarily in the forefront of my mind, but then kind of just sort of leaving it. Which again, 2023 and before me, you're like, oh, just leave that there for a minute, and we'll come back to it later. Panic. That's what do you mean? What do you mean? Like that can't be the way. Like so, yeah. Like for me, that's definitely the biggest thing of like I need that you don't need to have it all figured out. Sometimes it just takes some time to like marinate.
absolutely. Yeah. That's where it's like, I think it's good to get it out of your head onto like paper or like to recognize it, but it doesn't mean you need to solve it then and there. And this is where like it's almost being comfortable with the like the not knowing, which normally as you get older, you slowly start to learn the hard way. Like take me like the stage of life I'm in now, like I don't know how many children I have. I don't know what country I'll be settling in. I don't even know what country I'll be in next year. But like that kind of doesn't matter. And I've noticed this a lot since emigrating from the UK to Australia. So many people say, how long are you living there for? And I kind of think it's the wrong question because actually I'm just living here until I'm not, in the same way that you start a new job. No one says, how long are you going to be in this one for? Even though, yeah, you look back and most of your jobs did have an end point. You're just doing it now, right? And for the vague foreseeable. And the same as a relationship. You don't say, how long is this one going to last? Like, well, I'm in this relationship. Sure, it might end up ending. Hopefully it won't. But like, I'm in this relationship for the foreseeable. And then at some point later, you make a different decision. You don't need to worry about that just now. And that's where I think that kind of like, as you kind of go through more of these things, you learn actually you don't need to solve it all now. It doesn't matter. And if there is something that for whatever reason is really playing on your mind, yeah, maybe jot it down, maybe like every month or something. You could like just like note down your thoughts, think about it a bit. You know, if by nature it's not something imminent, then it probably doesn't need an imminent answer. So yeah, don't worry about it basically.
Yeah, definitely. Like one thing that I had like said to me, I was you know, this was quite a few years ago, going through a challenging situation, and it was very tough love, but it made a lot of sense. And it's something that I've always referred back to, and I've said it to friends countless times of like, you know, in the moment, in that hyper emotional state, you are not solving this problem. Like you need to go sort yourself out. And like that for me, like I thought that, you know, I was going to get this like divine intervention and get it kind of all like handed, oh, it's okay. Don't, no, like you're a fucking state. You are not solving any problems like this. You are hyper emotional. You're incredibly volatile. You could turn on a sixpence. Like you need to chill out and go away
Yeah.
and come back to this at a later date. Like, you know, I literally said to a friend of mine the other day, and I was like, "You're not this isn't working. You're not solving any problems right now, mate. Like, you need to go and chill for a bit,
Mm,
come back to it, and you'll be able to, you know, look at it with a fresh set of eyes." And I think that's kind of the point that, like I said, some of these things does. Again, it goes back to that really unsexy point of like, you know, like it would be great if we could give you some sexy hacks of, oh, like this is da 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 da. Like, no, like yeah, sometimes you just need to walk away from it. Something that feels like it needs to change now is a level of like, well, actually, you need to walk away and you need to come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh head, the emotional state is so much lower. Um, so yeah, like, I've definitely say that's something that you
for sure.
need to look into. Now, moving on a little bit, but kind of staying on the same topic, and I'd love your input on this because it's something that's been haunting me for years. And again, upon my own personal reflection, it is a question that has been poised by my parents. It's a question that's been poised by friends, partner, work, sort of mentory things that I've asked myself. And it's just something that I really struggle to deal with. And it's this question, and it stumps me every time. What do you want?
Mm,
That's the question that keeps killing me.
interesting. There's a few ways to go about it, I think. One is the inversion mental model. I'm not sure if you've heard of, but essentially answering the opposite question can be quite good. Like when we're at school, I don't know if you found this, but I found it quite hard to like decide even like what A levels to pick, let alone what career to like think about and stuff. And like an easier question is like, well, what do you not want to do? And then suddenly like a few things come up, right? So if you're trying to think about what do you want from your life, what do you want from your job or like from the social side or like sport or whatever, well, a good place to start can just be what do you definitely not want? And for me, that would be like, you easily things start cropping up. So I don't know if there's a certain area of your life where you've been struggling with this, be it career or like friendships or sport or something. But if I would spin that round and say, like, well, what do you not want? First, yeah, that helps you cut things out. But also it starts to point out if everything there is of a similar theme, then you can pull out, well, this is something that you probably do want. That's one good way to go about it.
Go for
Yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah. So like answer the opposite question, and then that gives you the negative of your answer. The reason is if you're trying to answer almost like, and the example I often use is like as a kid at like a teenager at school, like what do you want? What do you want to be when you're older? What job do you want? Do you want to be a banker or a lawyer or a doctor? There's so many different things that you're trying to optimize for there, like fulfillment and like social status and like the amount of money you might get and all these sorts of things. Quite hard. But if you just flip it around and go bottom up instead, like, well, what do you not want? And think, answer easy questions. So like, what time do you want to be waking up? Do you want to work with animals or children or like adults? Like these are kind of easier questions. So that's one. A second one, as I've kind of touched on there, is answer simpler questions. What do you want is quite a like vague one, like what the answer is going to be. If you're putting that through like a AI model, right? Imagine you're talking to someone like a computer that doesn't know certain things. What are you trying to optimize for when you're thinking about what you want? And that's where like getting clear on your values is quite key. So what I do is a lot with my clients where it's like, if you look at the values you've been moving towards and away from over the past month or so, maybe you've been moving towards like security and comfort and you've been avoiding failure. Well, obviously you're not going to start a business or like try something new because this is how you've been acting. So if you think about the values you want to embody, the things you want to move towards and away from, then you almost have a little cheat sheet of like, well, actually, if I just make decisions that help me optimize these values I want to move towards and maybe just like moving away from regret, then that kind of answers the question for me. So there's a few little ways you can think about it. I'm sure. I know I'm just like fine. I've got so many that I'll just find a couple thoughts in case that was
Yeah,
useful.
definitely. Like that's really, and again, it comes back to like the simplicity of it. Like it's always been for me the oh, like think about what you do want, not what you don't want. And yeah, I could sit here and we could talk about the black coffee theory and uh yeah, well, like, oh, well, what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want. But like you said, I think, like you said there, it's kind of like how you ask that question that actually could be really insightful and really powerful for you. So that's really interesting. Of almost like I've been like, I can sit here and tell you what I don't want, like, but that's not necessarily a negative, which
Mm,
that's got my head spinning. And then you've really helpfully gone through and said like a couple of my next points. Like it feels really weird that like, I thought I'd kind of got past this point of like, like those sort of like obligatory, appointments at college or at school where it's like you sit down with a careers advisor and it's like, what do you want? What do you want your job to be? And not something that you're, asking yourself, like kind of in the
mm.
mirror, like on a much deeper level in your like mid to late 20s. So that's definitely something to come with as well. And kind of to go off the back of what you said, and I think values is interesting. I know what I've done like values work before, and it is really heavy, but like the return on investment is crazy. And it like whenever I've done it, it's taken hours. to do. It's taken hours to do like values tests. Have you ever heard of Dr. John DeMartini?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. John's values, like values factor, like that's a great book. It's very long and it makes the same point over and over and over again, but it's because it's important. And he will bang that drum consistently for so long. And I think the biggest thing for Dr. John, like that process does take the time. And, for me, I've always hoped that, like one day, like there's some divine intervention or this answer like drops from the sky and just so happens to land in your lap. Again, this is fairyland. It's stories. Like, I'm not going to suddenly start riding to the shops on a unicorn. Like it's the same sort of pie in the sky. This doesn't like you're barking up the wrong tree kind of thing. But something that I found that's been really, really useful in this kind of space is try new things.
Yeah, experiments for sure.
And, try new things, meet new people, put yourself into like different situations. Almost like have you seen it is a meme, but like it is absolutely it's so right. There's almost like a sort of cross section here of like the more you fuck about, the more you find out, and the more you find out, the more you fuck kind of thing. Like that is obviously meant as like as a joke, but I can't get away. Actually, there's so much in here that's really valuable. Like there's so much to take away, and you can genuinely get so much out of it from sitting there and asking yourself those questions.
Doing something to your point around the experiment, that's where like, you can do some thinking, but definitely and that's where like, just go try something, see how that works. Treat it as a little experiment, takes the pressure off. Do it for like a day, a week or whatever, see how you go. And then to avoid point around like, yeah, staring in the mirror, doing the hard work. Because the point I'd make is if you're not staring in the mirror, doing hard work, things like this at 20, in your 20s, 30s, whatever, to try and improve yourself, either the arbitrary decision you made at like 15 or whatever was so good, so fair play, and aligned you to a T both then and like 15, 20, 30 years later. So fair play if so. Or you're kind of just passively going through life without that intention, likely then following someone else's whim, whoever your boss or whoever speaks the loudest, to avoid like having to deal with any of these things. So like it's up to you to pick it, but I don't think it's definitely necessarily a bad thing at all to be, revisiting and rethinking this because you normally get to a much better answer.
Yeah, definitely. And it's almost like the one of my favorite questions. It is like knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? And
Yeah.
it's using that insight, foresight, whatever you want to call it, introspection of your experience. Like I know more now than I did yesterday, but I know even more now than I did 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was a gobby little shit who thought he did know everything. But I definitely think that's a great place to start. Of like what you said there about like an inversion model,
Mm.
which we already said that a couple of minutes ago. That's still got my head spinning. So fair play for that. I love podcast episodes that get me like this. Yeah, I'm coming off. And I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing today. Good job. I got the day off.
Good.
Amazing. Kind of moving on to the final. I know that we're a little bit pushed for time, and the beauty of time zones that either someone has to get out really early or stay out really late. When you try and get the Australia episodes going, something that I love about you and I really admire about you is the reviews that you have and your relationship. I was looking through your sort of social media to like that. Let's pull out some kind of talking points. You've got a reel with 2.3 million views about how you and your partner review your relationship every month. Tell me a little bit more about why you do this.
Yeah, interesting. It's a very polarizing and quite interesting topic, but for me, it makes perfect sense. So, like, as I was kind of alluding to before, in say the corporate world and stuff, you have goals, you work, and you build little systems to like achieve whatever that is. And so we review our work, we track our progress, and we make sure we're growing and developing and hitting our goals, whatever, right? But normally, we just don't replicate that in any other area of our life, and then we question why we're not making the progress. Now, the one area we might do is something like physical health. Like you might set like bench press goals or running a certain time, and then maybe you'll have a running coach or a PT or something to help you get there. And then you'll maybe check in and so on. But for the other areas, it just doesn't happen. And so I would say that our relationships, and specifically one with a partner, is definitely, at least for me, like one of the most important areas of my life. So it just seemed absolutely bonkers not to at least apply some of the techniques that work somewhere else and give half as much effort to that as all these other areas of my life. You know, if say at work you're having all these meetings, check-ins with your manager and like progress and all this stuff, and then we spend like 20 minutes a month doing like, checking on how we're going in a relationship. And it just like really brings it to the forefront of like, this is something important to me and matches that intention. So that's kind of where it came from. And then it also came from, I was doing this myself with my personal goals and my professional. I was like, hold on, why am I not doing this in these other areas? And honestly, it has by far been one of like the best things we've done. And like, I think it's why our relationship is so like, I guess I can only talk compared to like my past relationships and like externally seeing others, but like so sound is because you actually have this space where you can like kind of work on it together as part of a team, and then you avoid any kind of like conflict mentality, win lose. And it's like, what have we done well? What can we do more of? What do you want to do more of? And like, yeah, it's just, it kind of came from, like the corporate world in a weird way. But yeah, I personally love them. I think think everyone should give them a crack.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And I like when you were talking there and like obviously almost like explaining the logic of it. Like I just love the way that your brain works. Like 'cause it's kind of like it just makes like you said, oh, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. And like you obviously need to not think in the same loops that you usually do. But I just love the way that you think that.
Thank you.
It's brilliant. Keep doing what you're doing. Um,
Yeah, I think, and as I said, it's like it started off with just like being, and it still pretty much is just a check in. But in general, now we go through three things. Like one would be sort of like, it's kind of how I run my personal like reviews when I'm checking in on what went well the past week and month. It would be like glows. So like what went well, what have we enjoyed, what have we appreciated about each other. And this is where sort of like love language stuff comes in, like there's a classic example where like one person appreciates one thing and they keep saying the other person looks nice, but they don't care about that. All they want is to help with the chores or to like a gift or whatever it is. So like when you know what your partner appreciates and when you can share that, then you can make sure you're doing that. The next one is sort of like grow. So what could they do more of? Is there anything that would be, sort of like constructive sort of or criticism or feedback, but just like, oh, even just like, I would love more of this. I really appreciate it when you did this, or any goals you want to like hit. So that's kind of how we run it. And in terms of the impact it has had, I'd say we started them pretty early, so there wasn't really much of a before time. But compared to others and how I found it, I think that what you do is when you have this sort of like safe space to like proactively talk about these things, nothing ever boils up. Like, we've never had a fallout or an argument because you don't get those sort of like, like slight tensions and then like a bit of a sassy comment. And then like eventually something boils over when something happens. And it's like, well, you never X, Y, Z because you're always nipping things in the bud. So I think that's been like a key impact that it has had. In the same way that, as I said, having these little reviews, checking in on yourself or your work means that you never get to a point where, oh crikey, I've been eating unhealthily or I haven't exercised for like 2 years because I never really, I just like was the frog in the boiling water slowly changing. So I think it's helped us first, like, yeah, nip in the bud any things that we want to change. Second, get to know each other really well because you get to the point where you realize what they appreciate is not the same as what you appreciate and vice versa. And the kind of way that they think is completely different. And third, I think it's been really exciting to have a dedicated period of time, like 20 minutes a month. Normally we do it over date night, being like, what would we love to do next month? What would we love to achieve and get on the same team? Because otherwise you're kind of going about your own lives and then, yeah, going on dates and like co-currently kind of existing, but
yeah,
never really thinking, what would we love to achieve and how are we going to do that? Which I think's been, yeah, quite exciting.
1,000,000%. And like one of my biggest things when it comes to relationships is like I have my stuff, you have your stuff, we also have our stuff.
Yeah.
Not just goals, but like things that you do together. And because it's so easy to be like, and something that's like really at the forefront of my mind is like, well, okay, well, I finish work and you come home and you know you might have your stuff, I might have my stuff, and then we kind of get home and make dinner. Usually, something that is just like, oh, like a stress situation within itself. Then you sit down, you eat your dinner, usually in front of the TV, and then next thing you know, you sit there on your phone for a bit of time, and then you go to bed, and then you repeat the process. And like that's something that's very much at the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, well, actually, that's not like that's I'm not about that. And even like it's not like, oh well, find something to watch on the TV together. I don't really care about that. That's not a high. It's nice. Best believe, when it's traitor season, 8 o'clock on whatever day it is, yeah, cancel all plans. And I'm not
Yeah.
making this for the world. And that's kind of how I personally view it. That's probably the only thing that I would stop it for. But um, yeah, definitely. I think it's having that, like you said there, it's almost that opportunity to nip things in the bud.
Mm.
Even not necessarily from my own experience, but like you talk about, you're like, yeah, well, they said this last night, and well, and it is those sort of like sassy little passag comments that then blow up,
Yeah, exactly.
nuclear, just like that, from no real, like, and it just doesn't need to happen. And again, it's somewhere along the line, there's been a bit of a disconnect, or something's not being quite communicated as well. Something that I love that you spoke about just then as well is about the love languages. So,
Mm.
have any like key bits of advice around like love languages that that you find have like a great return on investment for you, or is there a way that certain questions that you would ask your partner to be like to really understand what they need from you at a given moment?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting what you said about nipping in the bud, because Freud had like a quote that was along the lines of unexpressed emotions never die. They like get buried alive and then come out later in uglier ways. And that's kind of what happens otherwise. And because you're then dealing with it, that never really has chance to sort of fester. And in terms of like the love languages, of course, it's just like a theory, but what I found really useful is, there's like, you can just do a quiz online, takes like 2 minutes and it's free, and get your partner to do it. And it's just kind of a stark, semi-objective way of understanding how they think and how different you are. Say myself, like I quite appreciate like words of affirmation or like quality time and things like this. And for other people, it'd be like gifts, but like I don't really care about anything physical that anyone gets from me. And if people do like acts of service or like help me out, I kind of just feel guilty and want to like do it back. It doesn't feel like a gift to me. It's like, oh, thanks, you like made this up. I'll make you dinner tomorrow. Whereas like saying I look really nice in my head, I think it probably comes from parents and upbringing and so on. But in terms of proactively how to use it, one would be like do a quick quiz because it is kind of interesting. And second, that's why it's asking what had they appreciated and saying, because otherwise you get to this point where people just feel like they're just shouting in the wind, and you almost get to a point where someone keeps buying gifts and buying gifts and buying gifts, and then being like, well, why are you not, I don't know, spending time to come and watch me play football or like spending time cooking with me? But it's because people just think completely differently, and that's where you just get people absolutely butting heads. So when you can really understand it from their perspective, you then get, instead of in a vicious cycle where that keeps happening, you then get to a virtuous cycle where actually the more that you, even if you don't care about it, buy little bits of chocolate for your partner if that's not for your thing, or just tell them they look nice or that their hair looks nice, even if that might not mean anything really to you, but they really appreciate it, then they will want to do more of the things which really matter to you. And that's where that communication really works. So simply just asking like, what do you really appreciate what I do? Like, what would you love us to do more of? Will probably show you. And it's unlikely that you have exactly the same kind of view on these things. So that's like the kind of questions that, it was pretty interesting to me. And it's so simple, but it can be like, yeah, pretty important and pretty game changing. And it's not just your romantic relationships. That's one final thing. So like, I would have the same with my friends, with my like family members and stuff. Like I know a few mates, like one guy, he really appreciates like physical gifts and stuff. So if I go away, I buy him like a key ring, like
Yeah,
for him, that he absolutely loves it, right? Fine. Okay, cool. And vice versa. So bearing that in mind, I think is a really powerful way of thinking about all relationships.
definitely. And yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it always sounds like it sounds a bit weird of like talking about it in like a friends context. Like, oh, my mate Dave loves words of affirmation. Oh, that sounds really cool, mate. And that makes him all feel all like giddy and warm inside. Like, especially as men, like that feels like a really weird
Mm.
thing to do. But I think it is something that needs to be done more of, because why wouldn't you want to strengthen those relationships, friendships, whatever you want to call them? Um, Mate, thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I think there's a lot to take away from this, and I think we've covered a lot of ground as well. Is there anything that you want to plug? Anything that you're working on at the moment?
Mm. Not particularly. I mean, I'm still just sort of like growing my coaching business, which has been, yeah, awesome. You can find me on Instagram at George Hearn. But in general, yeah, like I think for everyone, I would just encourage them to do this sort of self reflection. I share a lot of these like self reflection questions and tips and stuff online if that's useful. But otherwise, like like have fun with it and like um, keep building towards whatever your 10 out of 10 life is. Because the journey's pretty fun, and so is some of the checkpoints on the way.
Mate, amazing. Thank you so much. I know you've got to run. We'll call it a day there. Cheers, mate. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harvey. That was class as always.